Welcome back to the Logic Exchange. Ladies and gentlemen, please do not adjust your screens. We are not twins, I promise. On this episode, we're talking about the KPIs that actually matter, not just the surface level numbers everyone likes to track, but the metrics that tell you whether your marketing, intake, compliance, and overall growth strategy are truly built to last. Joining us is John Henson, the founder of Henson Legal. John advises clients on marketing compliance, AI voice in marketing, state privacy issues, and the evolving regulatory landscape that impacts how companies and law firms communicate with consumers. Before founding Henson Legal, John held leadership roles across private practice and in-house legal teams, including serving as general counsel at ConsumerAffairs, where he led legal, compliance, talent, and culture. He also spent time at LendingTree in a variety of roles, including vice president of compliance, assistant general manager of the home vertical, and interim general counsel. John brings a unique perspective because he has sat at the intersection of legal, compliance, operations, marketing, and growth. He understands what companies measure, what they miss, and where risk starts to show up when the wrong KPIs drive the strategy. A Tennessee native, now living in Birmingham, Alabama with his family, John is also a fan of great barbecue and college football, which means he knows a thing or two about competition, discipline, and playing the long game. This is the Logic Exchange, and this is KPIs that actually matter. I'm your host, Nick Thompson, CRO at Email Agency. Let's jump in. Welcome, John.
Hey, Nick, glad to be here. This is going to be fun.
Absolutely, man. Looking forward to it. So you and I, not too far apart. I'm just south of Nashville. You're down in Birmingham, so
Yeah.
we're firmly in SEC country. Obviously, we both like the game of golf. I think it's a great pastime and one that you get to kind of, I don't know, take some of the things that you learn in business and translate it to the course, right? Because you're not necessarily playing your opponent, which you are. You're actually playing the course, and I think that that's a kind of a great, I don't know, analogy for this game of not game, just the compliance that we have to toe the line on. And so want to jump into that, but again, thank you so much for being a guest today.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
glad to do it. And I agree with you, by the way, just real quick. I
yeah,
think the analogy that I use out of Sun is really starting to take the game seriously. And I was explaining to him, like, look, we're striving for perfection,
hmm
right? We want to hit that perfect shot, but we've got to be very happy when we hit good shots,
hmm
right? And compliance is the same way, really. Like, I want my clients to be perfect, and we want to do everything we can to be perfect, right? But we're happy with good as well because it's better than nothing.
yeah,
And if we can show a regulator or a plaintiff's attorney or whatever that, hey, this is the system we've built, and it's a compliance system and it's working, but now, yes, there are some leakages here or there. Like that's what they want. Like there is a value in an effort, right?
hmm
And that is incredibly important to remember for companies and law firms that are growing and wanting to build up their compliance program. It is striving for perfection, right? But not getting mad when it's good.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that. I love that. My wife is actually taking up the game. Well, even more. She's played
Yeah.
for about 20 years because that's how long we've been married. And this year she finally decided to really take it seriously. And she's like, well, I just want to hit the ball in the air. And I'm like, that's a great goal. Let's
Yeah.
start with that, right? Let's start with the little goals. And that equates to on the compliance side too, right? Because it's, to your point, you don't have to be perfect,
Right.
but you definitely have to have the foundation and you definitely need to strive for that. And good, not too bad,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm glad that your son's taking up the game. As you know, we've talked about a couple of times. My kid plays college golf, and it is a big part of our family.
Yeah.
It's our pastime, and it's one where I think that you get to challenge yourself while still having fun, right? It's not like, the you can go play football or catch in the yard, right? But you're not actually playing the game,
Right.
right?
Right.
You can go shoot hoops with in the driveway, but you're not really playing the game. When you
Yeah.
go play golf, you're playing the game. Same
Yeah.
exact game that we grew up watching Tiger Woods play, and that now we're seeing Scotty Scheffler dominate. Well, not so
Yeah.
much this year, but still playing pretty good.
Yeah.
But awesome, man, awesome. Well, let's jump in. When you're looking at like partner strategy, evaluation, and lead origin, that's kind of the bedrock for marketing in the legal industry.
Yep.
How do you vet and choose your marketing and or intake partners?
Yeah. So I have my clients I had two practice areas, one of them being lead generation, and that area is both buyers and sellers, right?
Mhm.
And the one thing I always explain to them is when you are using a partner, you're buying their compliance program. That's what you're buying,
Mhm.
right? And how much A, do you trust it, right? And trust that partner, right? And then how can you verify that trust? And there's some basic questions that you can ask that will really give you the answers to those questions will give you the direction on which you should think about trusting that partner. It's, hey, where are you getting your leads from? Show me where you're getting it
Yeah.
from. Show me
Yep.
your consent language, right? How many complaints have you had over the last year, right? How many times have you had to provide this information? If I needed information about this lead, could you get it to me in 48 hours or whatever, right?
They better.
Yeah,
They better.
you've got to be able to answer those questions. And I see a lot of affiliates who are like, they hem and they haw around it. And I tell my clients, like, look, if they're hemming and hawing around these questions, right? Like it's not a great sign. And the other thing I would say is, like, I think you can tell a lot about somebody, Nick, during contract negotiations. And typically, my general rule of thumb is no one has ever gotten easier to work with after contract negotiations. So like if they're playing hardball around their compliance obligations while they're negotiating the contract, that also tells you something, right?
Sure.
You want to work with partners who are like, yeah, look, here's our compliance practice. Here's how we store the leads. Here's how we drive traffic. Here's how we get consent. Here's how we review the ads. And if they can't do that or they're unwilling to share that, then that's a problem. That's a problem. Or
Yep. No, I
I'll
don't.
be slightly nicer. I'll be slightly nicer. That could potentially be a problem.
Sure. Fair enough. You're aware that it could be a problem,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's
Awesome.
at least
Awesome.
telling you something,
Yep.
right?
Absolutely. So, kind of going along that same theme, what separates a basic vendor relationship from a true strategic partnership in this space?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot about transactional versus relationship, right? Like, and there are partners, and we had them when I was in house, and I have clients that have them now that they are purely transactional, and they are, I need, I need an extra 100 leads a day. I'll go turn this switch. I don't really care. I just need the extra 100 leads because I got quotas to fill. And then there are people who the relational ones are, hey, I need an extra 100 leads today, and I need it to look like this. Is there anything that you can do for me? Or I need this pricing to be here. How can we figure that out?
Sure.
You have to be comfortable with your partners, um, being somewhat transparent of like, this is what I need. This is what my, we'll call it cost per close is, right? This is what I need it to be. And how can I get there? Is there a way you can help me get there? And a good partner who wants a relationship will help you figure that out, right? And then the other ones are like, no, here's our menu, and you can pick what you want, and that's it. I see that a lot. And to me, I try to be a relational person. Like, I think that's how the business works. Business works
Mhm.
better when you have relationships. And I'm not saying you're best friends with the people. I'm just saying that they trust you, you trust them enough to have that exchange of, this is what I need, this is what you have, right? And how can we work together?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree with you. I think, being a strategic partner is something that anybody in this space, especially if you're in the business development side of the house, should strive for, right? You want to be somebody that is trusted,
Mhm.
has a good reputation, and that people know that they can count on what you say to actually become reality,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
setting the proper expectations and hitting those expectations. And then if you don't, owning that,
Yeah.
right? And being like, this is why, instead of being like, no, I don't know, bad week. No,
Yep.
that's not a that's an answer. It's not a good answer.
Yeah. I
So
mean, I've sat in meetings, Nick, where we know you have to cut spend, and or that it was a bad week conversation comes up, and the conversation is, this is the second time that this has happened, and they show no remorse and cut them loose. Or the opposite. I've been in those opposite conversations like, hey, I know that Nick's doing his best. There are some market issues here. So like we'll just move on and continue to give him money to help grow his side too. Right. Like sat in both of those conversations before.
absolutely, and I think that there's merit in both of them, right? Like if you are helping somebody and doing things the right way, and you need an extra couple days to make sure that you're still hitting those same KPIs,
Yep.
wink, wink, that you set the expectation on, then you that's okay as long as they understand that, right?
Yeah.
When they don't, then it's like, all right, now let's have a conversation as to or reset that conversation. I'm a big fan of meeting my partners where they're at, right?
Yeah.
Like, what are you needing out of this? I believe you and I were sitting in the same NLVA compliance committee meeting where Earl McCarthy, and I'll give him this because I love it, said that culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yep.
And I think having a culture of serving your partners, comes back twofold.
Yep.
People remember the way that you treat them, and people remember the way that you make them feel. And I will add a third one. People also remember what you've done for them.
Yes.
And as long as you continue to serve those goals and come at it from a culture of serving the relationship, I think you're going to be in a good spot.
Yep. Agree. Absolutely.
Um, so one last thing here in kind of partner strategy evaluation and lead origin before we get into lessons learned and ethical sourcing, which I think we're going to spend a lot of time talking about stuff. What information should a firm always ask a marketing partner before working with them?
One, I think references, obviously, like who else do you
Mhm.
work with in this space?
Yep.
Um, and legal is somewhat unique, right? Because I come from a lending background, a national lending background, right? Who do you work with in my practice areas, in my geographic areas, right?
Mhm.
Um, and
Who am
that's
I competing with is what I heard you just
yes,
say.
exactly, exactly. Because I think the answer to that is really interesting. I don't think that I am not a person who is 100% against, you were working with two divorce firms in Birmingham, right? Like that's fine. You can, because practice areas differ, right?
Mhm.
Even divorce. Like I could want to be high growth. I could be looking for something, and this other person could be looking for something else. And an agency or a vendor can serve both those masters, I personally think, very well. But I still want to know, right?
Absolutely.
I think that's thing one. Thing two is uh, I want to say show me your secret sauce because I don't believe that anybody has secret sauce. Like I think that is a myth. I think that's what marketing people want to say when they don't want to explain what it is they do. But like show me how you're going to drive traffic. Show me
Mhm.
what you're going to do. Show me what are the gaps that you see me currently have, and how are you going to fill those, right?
Mhm.
Um, and again, I don't believe people have special sauce. I know marketers hate it when I say that, but it's true.
Mhm.
Because we're all buying the same leads and we're all making the same similar ads, right? So I think those two really, who are you working with? How are you going to get me those leads? And what's it like to work with you, right?
Sure.
And I think that's a key, right? Can I call you on Thursday afternoon and say, hey, next week, I really need X number more leads, right? Or next week, I really need to cut my lead spend in half, right? How can we do that, right?
Mhm.
And again, I will say, um, if you haven't guessed this yet, like I am very PPC heavy. So I do think that I'm used to working with immediate levers, right? So that's why I have those short time frames. But I think you have to be able to answer like, and if the agency says, or the marketing partner says, hey, I can't cut that off that quick, or I can't scale that quick. Um, why? And it goes back to relationship. Um, it's not necessarily a bad thing they can't, right? But like, why can't you, right?
Sure.
Or because if there's a good reason, great. Like, and that way we're all upfront. We all know each other, right? So it's who else are you working with? How are you going to drive me this traffic? And B, like, what's it like working with you? Like, how flexible are you? Because I want to know that going in.
Mhm.
And I don't want to be sold a bill of goods. Like, hey, we're super flexible and we can turn on a dime. But if you're telling me that you can't change campaigns for 10 to 15 business days, like that's not turning on a dime. My business is more dynamic than that, right?
Yep.
So for in law firms for lots of reasons, right? Like I lost a lawyer, or I gained a lawyer, or we're moving into a new market, right? Or we want to do something, we're trying to do something different. Like the legal business is dynamic, just like every lead buying business is dynamic, and we want partners who can be that dynamic, right?
Yep. Completely agree with you, man. I mean, things happen, right?
Yeah,
I'm switching out my phone system. I have a new associate. I'm going to be on vacation. Yeah,
yeah,
like things happen, life happens, and you have to be able to adjust to those things and maybe not plan for them, but be ready to react
yes.
to those things. I think that that's very important. Before we go into the next section, John, what is the best way for folks to get in touch with you if they need to get in touch with you?
Yeah, probably the best way is LinkedIn. Very active on LinkedIn.
Yes, you
It's
are.
this face. And then you can also find me at john at henson-legal.com, which is my email. So those are probably the two best ways.
Awesome. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Well, the next section, I think like I said, I think we're going to spend a decent amount of time
Yeah.
on. And that's lessons learned and ethical sourcing. Two things that I think are near and dear to your heart. They're near and
Yep.
dear to my heart. Um, what are the biggest do's and don'ts that you've learned in not just legal marketing, but just yeah, let's keep it with legal. What are the biggest do's and don'ts that you've learned in legal marketing and intake along the way?
Yeah, I will say that I mean, God, this we just keep beating this theme to death, and that's fine. But like honestly, it's don't tell somebody you can do something you can't. I
Hmm.
mean, you and that's
Oh, you
across the
mean the
board.
golden rule? We
Yeah,
should we should
yeah.
we should do that.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And like I've seen it 100 times. Uh, I mean, I've got two issues right now for clients in a very similar frame that a vendor told them, yeah, we can do XYZ, and they can't. And if your Q3 plans are based on your vendor saying you can go do XYZ and they can't do it, like, well, like that's a huge, huge problem. And I also think that another, and this is somewhat ethical and it's somewhat related. It's like it's just a mistake I see people make. If a vendor is a standard deviation cheaper than everybody else, there's a reason there's a standard deviation cheaper than everybody
Sure.
else. And I always like to say that like no matter what your vertical is, right, whether it's insurance or legal or mortgage, a quote good lead has a certain price, and we can all basically tell you what that lead cost, right?
Should be.
If
Yep.
somebody
Yep.
if somebody's above it, why? Maybe their quality's better, right? Maybe their
Yep.
contact rate's better. Maybe their close rate's better. And therefore their leads are worth more. And if their leads are less than what we all think that standard price should be, why is that? And there's reasons that they can be less and that I can accept. Hey, I know that they're not going to convert as well. But I'll need more at bats, and therefore it's cheaper, right? But if somebody is a standard deviation less than that, like, okay, why, my mortgage leads $100. Why are you $20? Right? Because like that just means you're selling me crap.
Hmm.
So,
Yep.
and I think that that is underappreciated um, for new lead buyers. And we're seeing a lot of new lead buyers in the legal space. And I'm sure you're seeing it too, is that
Yep.
these are people who have been told they should be buying leads. They've been told they need to get better intake. And they're probably right, to be very clear. But they haven't been told what that looks like or what good looks like. So
Yep.
that, and
They don't know. They don't know what they don't know.
they don't know what
Right.
they don't
Like
know. And then
that's it.
yeah, and they don't know why this costs this much, and they don't know what conversion rates should be, and they don't know what pricing should be. So they're going to go to the lowest bidder. And I think that from an ethical side, right, if that marketer can't tell you why their price is so low, because again, there's justifications for it that are reasonable, right? Hey, these are older leads. They're not going to convert as well. They're going to have a lower contact rate, but there's some diamonds in there. You just got to go find them, right?
Yep.
Uh, then if they're not going to tell you why they're priced where they are, then like that's a red flag.
I completely agree with you, man. I think it's a situation where, like, I'll just do a shameless plug for email agency,
Sure.
right? We don't generate a lot of our own leads. We generate some of them, but then we
Yep.
use our trusted affiliate network that we've worked with for 15 years to send leads to us, which then goes into our own call center to be vetted, which then if they do make it through all of the intake, then they're served with a retainer, which we then pass that retainer package back to the law firm for whatever case it might be, whether it's Roblox or rideshare, whatever it might be, right? Um, but before it even goes to them, it goes into our 6 step QA and QC process because we want to make sure that number one, all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed. But
Yep.
also number two, does what the intake agent asked match what the firm is looking for? And if it doesn't, let's go back in and re-explore that before we put our QA stamp of approval on
Yep.
that and send it to the firm. So are we the cheapest game in town? No. Are we the most expensive game in town? I don't think we are. Try to be fair, but
Yep.
if it is higher, that's why,
Yep.
right? Like there's that extra step in there that we're critiquing our own work, right?
Yep.
To make sure that our own work is right. And another one I will get, another kind of war story, right? You had said like the talking about the new lead buyers coming into the space or the new retainer model, whatever they're looking for.
Yep.
I'm going to pick on Depo Provera.
Okay.
Tough case, in my opinion. When it first started, that was like a $2,700 retainer. Then it went to 5,500 because of fallout, right? Now it's at like 11 grand, and it probably should be at like 20, in my
Yeah.
opinion. And it's because of the fallout. Fortunately, Depo was given out like candy. A lot of people took it, right? So there's a lot of exposure.
Yep.
That proof of injury that everyone's looking for that meningioma, there's the rub,
Yeah.
right? That finding that person that has that proof of exposure and then also the proof of injury. And let's just be honest, a meningioma, everyone thinks a brain tumor, not a brain tumor. That's a tumor in the lining of the
Yeah.
brain, right? So I know exactly one person in my life, and I'm 45 years old, who's ever
Yeah.
had a brain tumor. I've known zero people that have had a meningioma.
That's right.
So finding that particular case is hard. And so having that conversation with the uninformed, put it that
Yes.
way, um, is tough because they're like, wait, what? They're what? And it's like,
Yeah.
well, no, this is why, right? We
Yes.
have a big pool over here, right? Top of the funnel, right? Up
Yep.
here, all the people that took it. And then each step of that, you eliminate folks,
That's right.
right? And getting them to understand that. And then having the proof of exposure and proof of injury is really where the rubber meets the road,
Yeah.
right? Like you're actually getting a retainer that has exposure. They took whatever medication or they were exposed to whatever is going to hurt them, and then they have proof of injury, so they have that signature injury. And oh, by the way, it's also confirmed by med records.
Yeah.
Does that make it a compensable case? Absolutely not.
Huh. Yeah.
Absolutely not. There's a myriad of reasons why a case can fall out, but when we work on like a Depo case, you're going to get proof of exposure and proof of injury,
Yeah.
but you're also going to have to pay for it
Yeah. Well,
because that's what it costs.
exactly. And I think that like your process is the perfect example of what I call the Lego sorter, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like, I've got kids, and when they were little, they played with Legos and we had this Lego sorter and you dump everything in the top and then you shake it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the law firm is paying you to shake it out. And there's different levels, right? So each one,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to kick this out. And at the bottom, we have Legos of the right size we're looking for. Doesn't mean we've built, the castle or whatever. I've just given you the right pieces that you can go build the castle, right?
Yep.
And I think that's what I think new lead buyers tend to think that, oh, you're going to do all this stuff, and by the end of the time we get the Lego sorter, you're just going to hand me the castle. No, no, you still got to do some work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah,
that work, oh, by the way, is going to be a couple of years of
yeah,
work, probably,
exactly,
right? It's this
exactly.
isn't just instant gratification. So, kind of the next piece in this is the kind of volume versus verification, right?
Yeah,
There's a bunch of third parties that are out there to keep everybody honest,
yeah,
for lack of a better term, right? You've got your, you've got your smart reviews and folks like them. So in your opinion, if you were giving advice to a firm, how would you tell them to balance volume versus verification when they want to scale and build out a docket?
yeah. That's a great question. I think that one, it's how hands-on do you want to be, right?
Sure.
Because I have clients who want to do the verification themselves, right? Like, give me the leads. I've got people who are good at this. I've got people who know what they're doing. They can go sniff out, bad apples pretty quickly. We'll let them do it, right? And that's great. And that's a legitimate model. And then you have the smart reviews and the other firms out there who are no, they're outsourced, right? They're outsourcing it. Like, they'll tell you they're a lot fancier than that, and they probably are, but like, I'm simple, so they're outsourced, right? The So you've got to understand where you want to be in that. And I would say that if you're doing to do it internally, you better have good people, right?
Hmm.
Now the plus of that is you get to fine tune it a little better, right?
Absolutely.
Like,
Yep.
so you get to turn the knobs. And if you're going to go use a third party, then they're going to turn the knobs. Now, granted, they're very good at what they do, right? So that's kind of the initial thought, is what do you want to do? The second thing is, uh, does it make sense for your practice in a volume standpoint, right? Like, if you're focused on one or two areas, right? Uh, and we'll use the mass tort example, right? Like, if you're focused on Depo-Provera, or you're focused on uh, the hair relaxer one, right? Like, if you're focused on those things, then you probably should keep that in house, right? Because you want to build up some knowledge in that. But
Sure. Yeah.
if you're casting your net far and wide, it probably does make sense because you don't have the let's call it vertical knowledge, right? To go do it for all these various things. Again, great example would be MVA, right? If you're in Texas and you're doing MVAs and you're in Houston, right? And somebody says, well, I was on 4th Street. Okay, I know where 4th Street is, right? So, like, I know what that is. I'm not super worried about fraud in those because I can go literally put my finger where they say,
Sure. Yep.
right? So I think that's kind of the way I would think about it.
Gotcha. Okay, cool, man. I like that. I like that. So the kind of the last one in this, before we go into some of the other sections, and I'm feeling that you're gonna have a couple of things to say about it. What does ethical and compliant claimant sourcing mean to John Henson?
That's a good question. So I would say this, and this is, I'm going to give you a general answer because I think it goes across industries. What I tell clients that I want them to avoid is a WTF moment, right?
Okay,
No consumer should ever say, how the hell am I ended up talking to this person, right?
there you go.
So if that's the case, and if that's our guardrail, right, then we need to understand what that initial marketing piece is, what the consumer journey is from that initial marketing piece, including where they saw it, right? Did you see it on Facebook? Did you see it on Google search? Did you see it, somewhere else on a YouTube ad, right? What does that journey look like from first time they've seen the ad to the time they sign the retainer or talk to an attorney, right? Whatever your end step you want it to be. And at any point in that journey, the consumer says, how the hell did I end up here? Right? Like, that's a gap. And every single one of those gaps is going to be a problem for the lead buyer at some point in the journey.
Mhm.
So, and I tell clients that all the time. And because I've seen it firsthand from customer complaints of like, you'll appreciate this because you and I've been doing this too long, is we would get calls. Um, I'm looking for my 500 extra V-Bucks for Fortnite but all I got was these calls from these personal loan lenders, right? There's a
There it
disconnect
is.
there, right? So now we know, wait, we got a problem with some marketing sources somewhere, right?
Yep.
And that's what we're trying to avoid because each one of those, where's my V-Bucks, is a compliance concern,
You know,
right?
where's my iPad? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So I think that is the best way to think through that. And if, again, if you've got a partner who's not willing to share that customer journey, that is a red flag.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. You know, this is a space where transparency is not just a nice to have, it's a required
Yeah.
to have.
Yeah.
And if you're not asking those questions, or the partner that you're chatting with isn't giving you the answers that you want, you should absolutely not just throw a red flag. You should probably throw a couple.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one red flag is probably one too many,
Yeah. Yeah.
to
Absolutely.
work with somebody.
And we've all said it before, and it goes back to something we said earlier, right? It's like cheap leads can be very expensive.
They're
Can
probably
be
the most expensive thing that you could buy.
it can be very expensive.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. Completely agree with you. Well, let's jump into kind of looking at how you define success and real performance metrics when looking at these campaigns. You know, in your opinion, when do you know that a campaign is truly working? And what metrics differentiate real growth from just a quick temporary lift?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it's longer than people think, right?
Hmm.
Because in the lead industry, if you know where your good, if you're a lead seller and you know where your good leads are coming from, when I onboard you, I can move that lever that of the 10 leads I send to you, six of them are the good ones, and then four of them may be lesser quality. And you and I have seen it 100 times.
Hmm.
6 months from now, boy, those metrics change, right?
Sure. Yeah.
In what's happening. So that's why I say it's a longer lead time than you would think to know whether it's working. I think you can see that initial, okay, this could potentially be good. Let's make sure, but we got to watch the long tail, how that works. Um, and I think one thing that's somewhat unique in legal is, and it goes back to something I've talked about before, of just like the maturity of the legal lead generation space. You got a lot of people who still don't have their intake dialed in.
Sure.
As if I look at mortgage, right, which is where my main background is, very few mortgage companies buying leads don't have a good intake process, right? Like they got speed to lead down, they got their scripting down, those LOs know exactly what to say, they know
Hmm.
how to qualify people, and they can get you on and off the phone as quick as possible and move to the next one. And they're going to do it in 15 minutes, right? You and I both know there are people buying leads in legal that they hadn't even figured out where the lead's coming from in 15 minutes, much less calling them, right?
Sure. Yep.
So I think that's also part of legal's problem too, is that there is a lack of maturity across the market. So because of that, we want to be not too quick to judge that lead source, right? Like, if you're prioritizing lead source A on intake over lead source B, it's probably not necessarily, it's not an apples to apples comparison of quality, right? Because
Sure.
because if you're waiting till tomorrow to call B, that person's gone. And,
Absolutely.
and, and
That ticker's already
yeah,
ticking,
yeah,
right?
it's
Like it
gone.
just is
Yep.
what it is.
Yep. And so that's kind of why I want you to judge it with a grain of salt. And then I think also we want it to be an apples to apples comparison and understand, hey, it goes back to like we talked about earlier, there is a lead price, right? That a retainer or lead is priced at here. Am I getting close to that with this new lead source, right? So I think you've got to understand what that price is in the market and understand whether or not you're actually hitting that with that lead source. And
Completely agree.
so long story, long way to say this, Nick, is you've got to understand your bake out time too,
Yep.
right? You have to understand bake out time. And your lead vendor should understand bake out time too. And say, hey, I'm going to send you these 10 leads a day. And you're probably only going to be able to contact seven of them just because that's the way the game works. And it's going to take you two weeks to start seeing some traction, right? And the lender needs to know, I mean, the vendor needs to know that, and the law firm needs to know that because it goes back to setting expectations. All the conflict in life boils down to two things: communication and misunderstood expectations.
Sure.
And that's all conflict, all across life, right? Whether it's in your marriage, whether it's in business, anything, right? So you've got to be able to communicate with those vendors and understand what those expectations are.
Yep, I agree. I agree. And I like your analogy of bake time because I say that a lot as well. And it's how and that clock starts from the time that that lead is delivered or that
Yes.
retainer is delivered, whatever it might be, and it's ticking. And these folks literally had their hand up in the air, in theory,
Yeah.
saying, I need help.
Yes.
Right. And so you've gone through as the vendor and vetted them and done all of the things that you need to do. And then you get over to the law firm. And if that gets parked for even an hour,
Yeah.
they're like, wait, I need help right now.
Yeah.
Right. And so yeah, it's very, very, very important to keep your eye on that quote
Yeah.
unquote clock. Right.
Yeah.
So I think it's very, very important. I think that was a very good answer to that. And that kind of leads right into like looking at ROI, right? How do you evaluate ROI beyond just a simple cost per signed retainer in the legal space?
I think one way to do, I mean, this is hitting on some of the same things over and over. Uh, is it easier to work with this person and
Mhm.
these leads than
Well,
someone else?
real quick, John,
Yeah.
there's a reason why these things are hitting over and over because we're talking about how to do it the right way. Right.
True. That's true.
And so,
Yeah.
it's like, all right, cool. We've got the plan. Let's hammer this home. So anyway,
Yeah.
I take
Yeah.
that back. Keep going.
No, but you're right. And the real ROI, if you're going to look past cost per lead or cost per retainer, is this worth my time, this partnership, right?
Mhm.
Like, because if you got 10 leads and you were able to close two of them, that's great. And that's fantastic. But if you got two complaints from the other ones, right? Like, that's not worth your time. And
Right.
I'm just telling you, I'm seeing it, Nick, across the board that um, a, a a lot of my practice is TCPA driven, and historically, law firms have been somewhat immune from TCPA complaints, right? And when I say that, I don't mean completely immune. I mean it's just not they're not as active as like lenders or insurance companies, right? Boy, that has changed over the last 12 months.
Yep.
And as we jokingly said just a minute ago, or it wasn't a joke, right? Like those cheap leads you got are going to be really expensive if you got a TCPA complaint out of them. And I'm seeing demand letters to law firms for three calls of upwards of $50,000 demands. And um, so that's an ROI too, right? Like you've got to take that into account of like, hey, I'm getting complaints from this lead source and maybe you're not getting a demand letter now, but if you're currently getting complaints from them, like consumers saying, "Why the hell am I talking to you?" Right? Is there's going to be a demand letter to follow that if you play that out long enough, right?
Right.
So that's kind of the other balance you have to take there.
Absolutely. And my next question was going to be what's one underrated KPI more firms should track? But I think we just answered that. Maybe how many complaints
Yes, 100%.
does this vendor
Complaints?
have? I'm not putting words in your mouth, but maybe that's the underrated KPI that should be looked at.
No, complaints are the canary in the coal mine of compliance problems. And I tell people that all the time. Like, one complaint is an anecdote to his data, right? And um, I have this lead generation maturity model that I'm thinking through, right? And part of it is what's my cost per close, right? That's like step one. Everybody should look at that. What's my cost per close per vendor is like kind of step two.
Hmm.
What's my cost per close per vendor per channel, right?
Hmm.
And is kind of step three. And then you can also do complaints per vendor per channel because
Hmm.
then I can go back to you and I'm going to pick on you because I'm staring at you, right? Nick, I've gotten four complaints off these leads from your email program last month. Can you tell me what's going on there? Right.
Hmm. Yep.
And again, like we talked about, that vendor should be able to say, you know what, you're probably right. We had some issues with this list or whatever, and we've stopped that partner, right? Because you've got to be able, you as the vendor are going to be able to track that back through your affiliate network too. And again, most people aren't malicious, right? It's just, hey, this happened and let's go fix it, right? It goes back to where we were at the beginning. I don't need you to be perfect. I just want you to be good. Let's just hit those
Yep,
good.
absolutely.
Man. And so if your program is maturing in that way, you've got some insight into those KPIs of both cost and complaints. And you can go back to those partners and be like, hey, here's what I'm seeing. What's going on? Is this a systemic problem or was this a one-off?
Absolutely. No, I think that's a great point. One bit, and I know it was fictitious in what you were saying, but email agency, my company, we email is part of it, but that's
Yeah.
just how old we are.
Yeah.
That's where the name came from, right? Like that
Yeah.
was the way that marketing was done. We're primarily digital on Meta and
Yeah.
socials and all of that, but we just had to throw that out there.
Yeah.
But I do like your answer, and I think that it goes right into kind of the next section. Are we still good on time?
Yep.
Okay, awesome.
I got
Which
about 15 more
is
minutes.
innovation, automation, and evolution, right? Um,
Yeah.
AI,
Mhm.
AI. I feel like we can't look anywhere in our space without hearing about it. So I'm assuming that's probably going to be part of your answer. But what marketing innovation or channel are you watching closely as we round into the back half of 2026?
Yeah. So I would say, again, legal is somewhat interesting. I'm going to give you a little bit of background, then I'm going to answer your question. So, got in this industry 10 years ago. Uh, Mortgage lead generation was maturing, and the lenders were starting to catch up on compliance. And the leading lead generation companies from 10 years ago in mortgage aren't the same as they are now. And some of that is compliance related, right? Because the lenders were like, hey, I'm having compliance issues out of you, and those people fell away. I feel like legal is in the same spot now, and that our law firms are thinking, hey, they're thinking more about compliance, and probably the people who are generating a lot of traffic last year probably won't be the same people 2 to 3 years from now. The reason I say that, one, is I think, hey, there's more risk, like we just talked about with TCPA, that's starting to change. But then also, you're seeing, which is again mirrors what happened in mortgage 10 years ago, there is external factors coming into the legal space in regulation that we're not used to dealing with. You've got California's new rule, you've got Colorado's new rule, you've got those that are putting pressure on the system externally. And where it's going is, I think the compliance comes more and more important because you've got so many different state rules and different regulations putting pressure on the system. So that's kind of where my framework is on that. Related to that somewhat is the rise of AI, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because now not only do I have these pressures from that are specific to legal marketing, I've got the pressures that's related to all marketing on AI. You've got New York, who has said any AI generated advertisement that could deceive somebody that think it's a real person needs to be marked as AI generated. You're seeing it in AI voice, which is a huge part of my practice area. Um, and you're seeing it from the FCC for TCPA purposes, but you're also seeing it in states about, hey, you need to disclose this as a chat bot if it'll confuse somebody. And so you're seeing just this, it's a almost perfect storm for legal of industry specific regulation that's somewhat new and changing quickly. And then the entire marketing world is moving to some sort of AI, and it's also changing rapidly. And how do you balance those two things, right? So but it's been very, very interesting to see how my clients are handling those two things.
Absolutely. And can you expand upon that a little bit? Like in the automation and AI realm and
Mhm.
how it's kind of changing the way that we manage claimant qualification and communication. Can you expand upon where you see that going?
Yeah. So I think it's important to bifurcate what I call front end AI and back end AI,
Sure.
right? So on the back end side, you've got a lot of more visibility. You've got trying to get a lot more granular with your systems and processes on the back of the house functions. And that's been great, right? However, everyone's also trying to move that fast, as fast as we've been moving on the back end, on the front end, which now we're consumer facing. And slowly but surely, regulators are starting to catch up, right? Most of them are based around some sort of unfair, deceptive practices, right? And or the trying to limit those and how that applies to AI, right? If you're using fake actors in New York, right, or fake images, we want to disclose that. New York will not be the last state that has something like that. Um, and then any of that from the AI voice perspective, are we making the right disclosures? Do we have the right consent to call people? Because I mean, just telling you from being in this space, a lot of lawyers are like, hey, I really don't need written consent to call these people back because they've come through the space and they raise their hand. Okay, that's right. But if you're using AI voice, that's a completely different that's a
Agreed.
completely different risk factor, right? And then so then you also have the AI voice on the intake side, right? Like if your voice bot sounds so good that they think they're talking to an actual human, that's a risk as well. It's just they're adding all these different layers of risk at the different steps of the consumer journey that I'm seeing a lot of, and not just legal, right? But other verticals, like not understanding how that's all affecting what their normal compliance practice is. It doesn't mean you can't do it. It makes each part of that path slightly bumpier, right? Like, okay, we got to
Absolutely.
figure out how to get over that bump, right?
Yeah, you've got to be able to navigate those things, which means that you need to educate
Yes.
yourself on the pitfalls that could happen, right? Like if we do A and it leads to B, are we going to C or are we going to D, right? Like
Right.
which way are we going and how to navigate that? I think that's very important to understand. Last piece in this, do you see the industry shifting from speed first to compliance first when scaling, or is speed still king in your opinion?
Speed's still going to be king, but I think that it'll be a mix of the two. And I hate to cop out to that answer, but it will be a mix of the two.
Oh, no,
Um,
I don't think that it's a cop out, man. I think everybody wants things to be fast, right?
yeah.
They want it to be right and fast.
Yep.
And it's like, well, they can work that way, but oftentimes when it's like more, faster, 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 that's when you see corners cut.
Yep.
And that's when you open up yourself to these compliance issues, right?
Yeah.
And so making sure that your partner that you're working with is buttoned up is important because when you start applying pressure, and we both know this, it's going to find the weak spot, and
Yep.
that weak spot is going to break, and that
Yep.
weak spot, unfortunately, a lot of times in this space equals greed. And
Yep.
when that weak spot is pushed on, and everyone's trying to continue to make the same margins that they were and everything else, really hard to do that and stay compliant, right?
Yep.
And so making sure that you're working with the right partner is absolutely paramount in my
Yeah.
opinion. Anything to add on that?
No, I would agree. And I think that like if you're giving okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, if I'm going to lose 2 points on speed to gain 2 points on compliance, I would personally make that trade
Mm-hmm.
because in another life I worked at a bank and I can remember walking into a meeting and they're like, oh, here comes profit prevention, right?
Oh
And
wow.
my boss immediately said, I think you mean profit retention.
There you go.
And
I like that.
that is like the truth. I'd much rather be a little bit slower, but know that like these leads are going to be more compliant. I'm probably going to get to keep the money I make off them as opposed to paying them to a regulator or outside counsel, right?
Absolutely, completely agree, man.
Yeah.
As long as you do it the right way, you're going to be able
Yep.
to hold on to more of that. And do you want to, like I say to my partners all the time, like, do you want to pay this now, or do you
Yep.
want to pay it on the back end? Because you're paying it no matter what. And that's
100%.
the same, and the same thing with on the speed side. And like, do you want to keep the client, or do you want to lose the client and probably pay a fine, right?
Yeah.
Like which
Yeah.
which one sounds better to you, right? I
Yeah.
think that that's important, and it's I think it's a great segue into we have two more sections, and the first one is the future of legal marketing and case acquisition, and the last one is leadership, culture, and philosophy. How do you see the claimant acquisition landscape evolving as privacy regulations and TCPA enforcement tightens?
Yeah. I think that we are going to see um, a shakeout in the legal side of who those top lead providers are, because I think the ones that are going to focus on compliance, I do think will win out long term, because this is not becoming less regulated. It's just
No,
not.
no.
And from a privacy standpoint, from a TCPA standpoint, from a UDAP perspective, which is unfair and deceptive practices, and just general marketing regulation, um, it's just going to get harder. I can remember we used to say this new administration, whenever there was a new presidential switch, this will be better or worse for lead generation. I don't think that's true anymore. I think
Mm-mm.
they're both bad. I mean, bad, right? Like that this is an area that regulators like because it's low risk for politicians, right? And no politician has ever said, I don't really want to stop robocalls, right?
Right. Yep.
No one's ever said that. So that's part of it. I think you're just going to see an increase in regulations and compliance needs there. And then you also have on the legal side, I mean, you're starting to see it in, those bell cow states of California, New York, Colorado. Like these rules are going to change and they will
Yep.
be adapted throughout the country. Those are the same main states that started the privacy laws, right? And there were one or two, and now there's 21. There's one or two, there's going to be 21 states with some legal lead generation, um, which is bizarre to me. So I think that's where we're going. I just think it is.
I completely agree with you, man. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago when everybody was kind of losing their mind about one-to-one consent, right? And that's what we're now seeing in California, and not exactly the same thing in Colorado, but similar. And I just think that it's going to continue to fall down that,
Mhm.
and the firms and the agencies that were prepared to deal with one-to-one, hopefully they didn't scrap that playbook because
Yeah,
it's coming. And I think that it's very important to be able to roll with those things and not be like, all right, well, you know what, we're not gonna advertise in California anymore.
yeah,
No, you can still do that. You
yeah,
just have to work directly with the firm, and that firm needs to be on in your privacy policy and in the TCPA.
yep,
It just consent part. It just has to be that way. And if you feel like that is going to hurt your business, I think you need to take a long, hard look in the mirror and ask yourself the question that we've been saying a lot: why?
right.
And if you can't answer that question for yourself, then maybe you need to look another way.
Yep.
Um, so one more on this one. What does the future of mass tort? Well, let's take mass tort out of it. What does the future of legal claimant acquisition look like to you?
Yeah, I think you're going to see. I think it's twofold. I think one, I think as the industry matures, like I talked about earlier, uh, you and I both know if we picked 20 random firms right now, three of them, I'll be generous. Five of them are really good at intake, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then 10 of them are okay at it, and then five of them are bad, right? I think those numbers shift. I think uh, intake gets better and better, and I think people will get it better at intake. So which will help overall. I also think, and I'm seeing this in other industries too, and you mentioned it, one to one. When one to one happened, it led a lot of lead buyers into realizing, oh my gosh, we've got a lot of risk out here with these third parties.
We're very exposed.
We're very exposed. Should we bring this in-house more
Mm-hmm.
and understand how we can generate some leads on our own brand? I see that happening in every industry I deal with, and I'm seeing it happen in legal too. We're seeing a lot more people focus on brand. And I mean, that big firm out of Florida has said that they're going to do $1 billion a year in marketing. Not everybody's going to, right? But not everybody can. But I think if you're not figuring out how to market and spend more on brand, you're going to be left behind. Because I can tell you from working in places I've worked, the companies that marry a strong brand with a strong lead generation program, including strong intake, right? Those are the brands that win, man. Like they win.
Yep.
Especially if you're in a competitive world, that again, it goes back to this, right? I can avoid a what the hell moment if if I pick up the phone and say, hey, this is Henson Legal, right? And I've spent money on brand that the person on the other end knows who I am. right?
Yep.
That's the reason John Morgan spends that much money, is
Yep.
that when you come to him, you already know who he is and you're not surprised, right? So those are the two areas I see a lot in the legal space is intake's going to get better. People are going to get better at intake, means they're going to get better at lead generation as they mature. And then two, going to be an additional spend on brand.
Yep, I agree with you. And I think that Morgan and Morgan and Morgan and Morgan and Morgan and Morgan, kidding. We both live in the South, so we've heard the commercials.
Yes.
But they've done an incredibly good job about branding themselves, and I think that a lot of other firms could take a page out of that book because I'll pick on my good friend Michael Watts, right? Everybody knows John Morgan because of that, right? So if you're whether you're in Baltimore, you're in Los Angeles, you're in Birmingham, you're in Nashville, you're in New York, you've probably heard a Morgan and Morgan commercial, right?
Yeah.
Um, Michael, one of the biggest litigating attorneys in the nation, outside of Texas, maybe California, folks probably they may have heard of Watts Law Firm,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have the brand recognition that a Morgan and Morgan has. And I think that everybody that is pushing for that right now is ahead of the curve and
Yeah.
is smart because they're trying to establish that because of you can't even say what's coming, what's here,
Yeah.
right? It's here at this point.
Yeah.
So we
And not
okay.
not to, not to opine on things that I probably shouldn't, but I I think I know a lot about this space, right?
Yeah, I think so too. That's why you're
It's
here.
branding doesn't mean side of buses always, right?
Sure. Yeah.
If I'm in Birmingham and I want to do truck car crashes, truck accidents, there's a Birmingham truck accident lawyer niche that someone has to fill. And
Mhm.
that's part of branding too, right? Is filling
Absolutely.
that niche, which again, once you then if I'm adding that to my lead generation thing and you get, matched with me and you're like, hey, this is John Henson. He does bus accident or truck accidents in Birmingham. No, this is great. I was hit by a truck in Birmingham, right? Like that's how that builds. You don't have to go be the be all end all.
Right.
You have to go compete where you can win and build that brand where you can win.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. And it's not quite grassroots, but it's close, right? Like that's
Yeah.
kind of what you just need to get your name out there. One last section, and then we'll be done. And this is more about like leadership, culture, and
Yeah.
philosophy. You've done a lot in your career, John, and very, very impressive. What's the hardest part of leading a team in today's legal environment?
Getting out of your own way.
Okay,
And like what I mean by that is sometimes well, not sometimes, like it can't be about you, right? Like I grew up in retail and my dad worked at a shoe store. He later ended up buying it. And I worked there growing up. And, I took out trash, I cleaned bathrooms, and if you're not willing to do that dirty work, right? Or whatever that dirty work is in your firm, and you're too good for it, then it's going to be very hard to lead those people, right?
sure.
And
Yeah.
I know people, and people that refer to non-attorney staff, right? That sets me over the edge every time I hear it because like those
The
people
caste
run
system, right?
those
Like,
people run your business, right?
yeah,
Like
it's amazing.
you couldn't find the courthouse without those people, right? And so like it's that's what I mean, just getting out of your own way and understanding that if you're building a firm, you're building a firm full of people that all need to go the same direction. And
Hmm.
it's if you have a cult of personality, like that's going to end up being a problem long term. It's going to end up being a problem long term.
No, I like that. And I think that's very wise. This philosophical, but I think that's important to ask. How do you foster a culture that values both growth and integrity?
You don't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you foster one that values integrity,
Love that.
and the growth will happen, right? Like if you're doing things the right way, it happens. Now, obviously, that's somewhat constrained, right? Of like if you're not willing to spend the money to grow, right, then you're not going to grow, right? But you can go spend money, and if you're a shitty person, then like that's not going to stay there forever, right?
Yep.
It's just not. And integrity matters, and integrity is yeah, integrity matters, but I don't think you can have growth without it.
I agree with you, man. And I know that it's cliche, but integrity is doing the right thing even when nobody's looking.
Yeah,
And I really like your answer. I've always said I said it earlier, culture eats strategy for breakfast. That doesn't mean that you don't have to have a plan,
yeah,
right? You have to have a
right.
plan, but I would much rather take a team of B and C players that are all rowing the boat the same way, um, rather than a couple of quote unquote A players
Yeah,
that are going to be hard to work with. Don't don't say that there's an I in team, but understand there's a me in team,
yeah,
and only care about themselves, right?
yeah,
I think that it's very important to surround yourself with like-minded individuals that are all rowing the boat the same way. So I really like what you
yeah.
said there.
And the last thing I'll say on that is, um, I've said this before about places I've worked and people that I've worked with and clients is do not confuse being in the river and going where the river's taking you with rowing the boat the same direction, because
Damn
those
right.
are
I like that
two
too.
different things, man.
Yeah.
Like, you've seen people who have grown and they're like, look how great we are. No, the market grew and you were there, right?
Yep.
It grew despite you, not because of you, right?
Yep.
And I think that's incredibly important to understand.
I think what I just heard you say is be the change that you want to see.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. And like you can affect the market and how it works, right?
Yep.
But like you have to be proactive in doing it
Yep. Completely
for
agree with you.
sure.
All right, buddy. Last question, then we'll cut you loose. And I truly appreciate you being on today.
Yeah.
Um, what's one piece of advice that you give to firms trying to modernize their marketing and intake operations today?
Step one is understand your intake process. Like, because if you're limited on speed to lead, which is fine, a lot of people are, like, then you got to adjust your expectations. Like, you just have to. Because you're not going to be able to compete on that if you physically, for whatever constraints, cannot change that right now, you've got to understand where you're at. And I think that honestly, I think that sets the tone for everything else.
Yep. I agree, man. I agree. John, thank you for being
Yeah.
on today. If folks need to get in touch with you, I know we did it earlier, but
Yeah.
for those that are still listening, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, or you can email me at john@henson-legal.com.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, everybody, if you like what you saw today, please like and subscribe. Please reach out to John. He is a wealth of information. This was the Logic Exchange, the KPIs that actually matter, with special guest John Henson. My name's Nick Thompson. I'm your host, as usual, here on the Logic Exchange, CRO for Email Agency. John, I will see you very, very soon. In
Absolutely.
fact, I think I'll see you next week in Nashville,
Yeah.
at that conference that's coming up. But buddy, I truly appreciate it. Thank you for being a guest today,
Oh,
and
I'm
we'll
glad to
talk
do it,
soon.
Nick. Talk to you
All right.
soon.
Yeah,
Bye.
take care. Bye bye.